During the mid-7th century BC, the Neo-Assyrian Empire stood as the greatest power the world had ever known, stretching across vast territories from Mesopotamia to Egypt. At the heart of this dominion was a formidable and intelligent monarch named Ashurbanipal. Born in 685 BC in the capital city of Nineveh, Ashurbanipal was the son of King Esarhaddon and the grandson of King Sennacherib. His lineage traced back to the Sargana dynasty, founded by Sargon II, a man who had usurped the throne and established a legacy of iron-fisted control and grand ambition. Despite being the fourth son, Ashurbanipal was chosen as the heir to the Assyrian Empire, a decision rooted in his sharp intellect and royal grooming. His ascension would bring both glory and horror to the ancient world, as he ruled not only with the wisdom of a scholar but also with the terror of a warlord. His reign began with military conquest, and his first order of business was to avenge his father's unfinished campaign in Egypt. In 671 BC, Esarhaddon had conquered Egypt and become the first ruler in history to control both Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley. However, his plans were cut short due to a terminal skin disease that claimed his life just as he was preparing to crush a rebellion in Egypt. Taking up his father's mantle, Ashurbanipal mobilized his forces and marched southward to Thebes, the heart of the rebellion. Thebes, a city revered for its temples and treasures, fell under brutal assault. The devastation was so complete that it was later referenced in the Hebrew Bible as a symbol of divine wrath. By 665 BC, Egypt was once again under Assyrian control, and Ashurbanipal installed a puppet ruler, Prince Psamtik, who had been raised under Assyrian tutelage. However, while Egypt simmered under Assyrian dominance, threats began to rise from the east. The kingdom of Elam, an ancient rival of Assyria, launched a surprise invasion into Babylonia, seeking to take advantage of Ashurbanipal's absence. Led by King Urtak, Elam's forces were repelled swiftly, and Ashurbanipal wasted no time in preparing a counteroffensive. Meanwhile, his own brother, Shamash-Shum-Ukin, appointed king of Babylon, grew discontent. Though given vast lands, cities, and armies by Ashurbanipal, the Babylonian king envied his brother's superior title and authority. Secretly, Shamash-Shum-Ukin began conspiring with Elam and other rebellious states, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic civil wars in Mesopotamian history. As Ashurbanipal prepared to crush Elam, he was unaware that treachery brewed within his own bloodline. By 653 BC, he launched a brutal campaign against Elam, culminating in the Battle of Ulai near Susa. The Elamite king Tuman was decapitated, and Ashurbanipal's fury knew no bounds. He claimed to have dammed the Ulai River with the corpses of his enemies and turned the waters red with blood. Relief sculptures from Nineveh even depict him and his queen dining beneath Tuman's severed head, hung from a tree, a macabre symbol of triumph. The campaign solidified Assyrian supremacy, but the cost of victory would soon reveal itself. As Ashurbanipal basked in the glow of his conquest over Elam, shadows deepened within his own empire. His brother Shamash-Shum-Ukin, once entrusted with the throne of Babylon as a loyal vassal, had grown increasingly rebellious. Ashurbanipal had lavished him with resources, troops, horses, cities, fields, and wealth. Yet the Babylonian king grew restless under the weight of his brother's supremacy. In secret, Shamash-Shum-Ukin formed a vast coalition with Elamite remnants, Chaldeans, and Arabian tribes, aiming to overthrow the Assyrian king. The conspiracy erupted into full-scale civil war in 652 BC. Though Shamash-Shum-Ukin had gathered a formidable alliance, Ashurbanipal's military prowess and seasoned army proved overwhelming. One by one, cities in southern Mesopotamia fell. The siege of Babylon was long and devastating. Ashurbanipal spared no effort in breaking his brother's defenses, and eventually, in 648 BC, the city was breached. What became of Shamash-Shum-Ukin is a matter of debate. Some believe he died in flames, possibly by self-immolation to avoid capture, while others claim he was burned alive by Assyrian forces. Ashurbanipal, in typical fashion, described the outcome with chilling clarity. He claimed the gods had cast his treacherous brother into fire and destroyed his body. He mutilated the bodies of conspirators, feeding their remains to dogs and wild beasts. It was not just vengeance, it was divine retribution in Ashurbanipal's mind. With the civil war over, Ashurbanipal turned back to the east with renewed fury. Elam had not only assisted his brother's rebellion, but had also long been a thorn in Assyria's side. Determined to erase Elam from history, Ashurbanipal unleashed an unprecedented campaign of destruction. He besieged the Elamite capital of Susa and razed it to the ground. He looted their temples, destroyed their ziggurats, and scattered the bones of their kings. "I sowed salt in their lands," he wrote, leaving the region empty and lifeless. One relief sculpture immortalized the humiliation of Humbenhaltish, a former king of Elam, forced to serve food in Ashurbanipal's court. Other tales speak of rival kings chained by the jaw and kept like animals. Yet, in his unrelenting vengeance, Ashurbanipal made a crucial strategic error. He left Elam unoccupied and undefended. This created a power vacuum that invited the Medes, a rising force in the Iranian plateau, to move in and rebuild. This seed of oversight would grow into the eventual doom of the Assyrian Empire. After nearly 25 years of warfare, from Egypt to Babylon to Elam, Ashurbanipal finally found his empire at peace. With enemies crushed and rebellions silenced, he turned inward, pursuing what may have been his true passion all along: knowledge. Ashurbanipal was unlike most kings of his era. He had been educated as a scribe before he was chosen to rule, and he possessed a deep reverence for the written word. He established the world's first systematically organized library in Nineveh, now known as the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal. He sent scribes across Mesopotamia to collect, copy, and archive every known tablet, from omens and myths to rituals and legal codes. In his own words, Ashurbanipal declared himself the master of ancient knowledge. He boasted of reading tablets written in difficult Sumerian and obscure Akkadian. He even claimed to have studied inscriptions written before the flood. His ambition was not merely political, it was cosmic. He sought to preserve the divine order and truth through the written word. Among the 30,000 tablets in his library was the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving work of literature and a powerful reflection on mortality and kingship. Ashurbanipal believed that wisdom and fear were both tools of rule. He wielded one with the pen and the other with the sword. But like all empires built by conquest and maintained through terror, Assyria's might was not eternal. While the library flourished and reliefs portrayed the king hunting lions, a symbol of his dominance, cracks began forming beneath the grandeur. Ashurbanipal's later years were shrouded in mystery. He died in 631 BC, after nearly 4 decades on the throne. The cause of his death is unknown, but the legacy he left behind was monumental. However, with the emperor gone, the vast Assyrian machine began to sputter. His sons fought for control, dividing loyalties and weakening their grip. This internal fragmentation, combined with the resurgence of Babylon and the ambition of the Medes, marked the beginning of the end for the empire that Ashurbanipal had brought to its peak. What followed would be one of the most dramatic power shifts in ancient history, a reversal of empires, from Nineveh to Babylon. After the death of Ashurbanipal in 631 BC, the once mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire began to fracture. His sons could not match his might or unity, and within years the empire began to rot from within. A civil war broke out, further weakening its core, while long-suppressed enemies sensed opportunity. Among these enemies was a rising figure, Nabopolassar, a Chaldean leader who declared independence and seized Babylon in 626 BC. With this act, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was born, forged from the ashes of Assyria by a man determined to revive the glories of Mesopotamia. But it was not Nabopolassar who would restore Babylon to unmatched heights. It was his son, Nebuchadnezzar II, born in 642 BC, who would shape the destiny of the ancient world. Named after his grandfather, the governor of Uruk under Ashurbanipal, Nebuchadnezzar's Akkadian name, Nabuchadnezzar Usur, meaning, "O Nabu, protect my firstborn son," signaled his father's hopes and divine faith. Nabu, the Babylonian god of wisdom and writing, was believed to grant clarity and intelligence to rulers, and Nebuchadnezzar would embody both warlike ferocity and strategic brilliance. As crown prince, Nebuchadnezzar proved his worth early. In 609 BC, he and his father led forces to Haran, where the last Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal II, had gathered what remained of the empire. Their victory marked the true fall of Assyria. Following that campaign, Nebuchadnezzar led expeditions alone into the mountainous north of Assyria, further cementing his military skill. In 605 BC, as Babylon continued to rise, a major threat emerged from Egypt. The pharaoh Necho II attempted to restore Assyria's glory and reassert Egyptian influence in the Levant. Necho marched a massive army and established a stronghold in Carchemish, a crucial city near the Euphrates River. Nebuchadnezzar, commanding Babylon's forces, met him in a decisive battle that would echo through history. The Battle of Carchemish saw Babylon's tactical genius triumph over Egyptian ambition. Nebuchadnezzar crushed Necho's army, shattering Egypt's dreams of empire and establishing Babylon as the dominant power in the Near East. This victory is referenced in the book of Jeremiah, linking Nebuchadnezzar's name forever with biblical prophecy. Shortly after this triumph, Nabopolassar died. Nebuchadnezzar raced back to Babylon to secure the throne before his younger brother could claim it. The transition was swift and bloodless. His brother, Nabu-shum-lishir, disappeared from records, likely having failed in an attempted coup. In his inaugural speech to Marduk, Babylon's chief deity, Nebuchadnezzar prayed for a long reign, stability, and dominion over the known world. He immediately returned to the battlefield, conquering Ashkelon in the Levant and laying waste to its king and treasures. Babylon's power surged, bolstered by Greek mercenaries and alliances. However, in 601 BC, Nebuchadnezzar grew bold and marched against Egypt directly. This campaign, unlike Carchemish, ended in disaster. Though both sides suffered heavy losses, Babylon's failure emboldened its enemies. Vassal states in the Levant began rebelling, seeing the empire as a paper tiger. At home, Nebuchadnezzar's authority was questioned, and some cities revolted openly. Not one to tolerate dissent, the king redirected his fury. In 599 BC, he led forces through the Syrian desert, raiding Arab tribes and restoring fear in the empire's name. By 598 BC, he returned to Jerusalem, capital of the Kingdom of Judah, where King Jehoiakim, expecting Egyptian support, had defied him. The siege was merciless. Jehoiakim died during the siege, and his body was cast outside the city walls. Nebuchadnezzar installed Zedekiah, a puppet ruler, to govern Judah. Yet the Babylonians knew that the region was unstable. More conquests followed, including the Phoenician city of Tyre, further expanding the empire's influence and wealth. With every step, Nebuchadnezzar saw himself fulfilling a divine mission, to unite the world under the reign of Marduk and ensure Babylon's eternal supremacy. Babylon now controlled all major trade routes, stretching across Mesopotamia and into the Mediterranean. The king believed in universal kingship, a divine mandate to rule all peoples, a belief rooted in Babylon's religious tradition. However, the flames of rebellion were not yet extinguished. In 589 BC, Zedekiah of Judah broke faith with Babylon and sought independence, likely encouraged by Egypt once again. This led to Nebuchadnezzar's most infamous act, the complete destruction of Jerusalem in 587 BC. The siege lasted nearly 2 years, ending with the leveling of Solomon's temple, the exile of thousands of Jews, and the death or enslavement of the city's elite. Nearly a quarter of Jerusalem's population, around 20,000 people, were deported to Babylon in chains. This event, known as the Babylonian exile, marked the end of the Kingdom of Judah and began a profound transformation in Jewish identity and theology. It led to a move away from polytheistic Yahwism, which included worship of Yahweh alongside other deities like Asherah and Baal, toward the monotheistic Judaism we know today. In Jewish scripture, Nebuchadnezzar was portrayed as a divine instrument of wrath, the destroyer of nations. The book of Daniel describes him descending into madness, living like a wild beast, eating grass, his hair growing like eagle feathers and his nails like claws. The English poet William Blake immortalized this image in his painting of Nebuchadnezzar, crawling on all fours in madness. Yet from the Babylonian perspective, Nebuchadnezzar's reign was a golden age. He rebuilt the city's defenses, created canals, restored temples, and beautified Babylon like never before. He completed the massive moat and outer walls his father had begun, paved the processional way, and ordered the construction of the magnificent Ishtar Gate, adorned with vibrant blue tiles and images of lions, bulls, and dragons, each symbolizing a Babylonian deity. These projects were not just architecture, they were sacred symbols of order and power. Babylon became a marvel of the ancient world, a city of beauty and strength unmatched by any of its time. Nebuchadnezzar's reign stretched for over 4 decades, a rarity in the turbulent landscape of ancient Mesopotamian power. By the time he entered the later years of his rule, Babylon had reached an unimaginable zenith. It became the beating heart of the known world, a city whose streets echoed with the voices of countless nations, merchants, prophets, and captives. Towering ziggurats, lavish temples, and bustling marketplaces made it the jewel of the ancient world. And yet, within the shimmering grandeur, shadows grew. The same wealth and pride that had elevated Babylon also made it vulnerable to inner decay and divine judgment. Nebuchadnezzar's ambitions to rival the gods began to manifest more clearly in his final years. According to Babylonian tradition and biblical narrative alike, the king experienced a profound mental collapse. The book of Daniel describes a prophetic dream of a great tree cut down and a beast rising in its place. Daniel, a Hebrew captive and royal advisor, interpreted the dream as a warning. Nebuchadnezzar's pride would be his downfall. Shortly after, the king suffered a strange madness. He abandoned his throne and lived in the wild like an animal. For 7 times, interpreted as years, he wandered the wilderness, insane and forgotten. While scholars debate the historicity of this account, its symbolism is powerful. A king once revered as divine now crawled in the dirt, reduced to instinct and stripped of power. It served as a spiritual caution. No mortal, no matter how glorious, could escape divine justice. In time, Nebuchadnezzar recovered and returned to his throne. Whether this madness was metaphorical or real, his restoration marked a change in tone. The older king, once obsessed with conquest, turned more to religious reform and urban preservation. His last known acts involved the maintenance of temples and a series of inscriptions praising the gods for restoring his mind and kingdom. In 562 BC, Nebuchadnezzar died. He was buried in Babylon, having reigned for 43 years. His death triggered a rapid unraveling of the empire he built. His successors lacked his charisma, political intelligence, and divine legitimacy. One of his sons, Amel-Marduk, ruled only 2 years before being assassinated. The empire saw a revolving door of kings, some installed by military commanders, others overthrown by internal plots. This instability drew the attention of a new power rising from the east, Persia. While Babylon quaked in uncertainty, Persia, under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, began conquering territories at an alarming rate. By 539 BC, Cyrus marched into Babylon with little resistance, ending the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The once mighty Babylon became just another province in the Achaemenid Persian Empire. However, Cyrus treated the city with respect. He freed the Jewish captives, fulfilling prophecy, and allowed them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The city, though no longer an empire's capital, retained spiritual and cultural importance for centuries. Meanwhile, Ashurbanipal's memory fared no better. Though he had been the last truly powerful Assyrian king, his successors lost control, and by 612 BC, Nineveh, his glorious capital, was razed to the ground by a coalition of Medes and Babylonians. The Library of Ashurbanipal, one of his greatest achievements, was buried beneath the rubble of war. Ironically, it was this destruction that preserved it. Thousands of clay tablets, containing mythologies, legal texts, religious rites, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, remained hidden and intact for over 2,000 years until archaeologists unearthed them in the 19th century. Thus, while Assyria crumbled into dust and Babylon faded into memory, Ashurbanipal's vision of a recorded legacy lived on. In fact, much of what we know about ancient Mesopotamia today comes from the library of a king who saw the value of the written word in an age of blood and fire. The parallel legacies of Ashurbanipal and Nebuchadnezzar II form a paradox of kingship. One was a scholar-warrior, a man who ruled with both intellect and terror, leaving behind knowledge rather than cities. The other was a builder-king, a man who raised temples to the heavens, tore down nations, and shaped prophetic destinies. Both men believed they were chosen, ordained by their gods to rule all the earth. Both men sought to defy time. Both succeeded, and yet, both empires vanished. The lands they conquered are now layered beneath modern cities, their once great capitals now archaeological sites. Their names live on not in political power but in scripture, stone, and the whispers of history. And perhaps that is the most fitting end for kings who played at being gods, that their legacy survives not in thrones, but in lessons. For every ruler who builds towers to the heavens, there is a fall. For every lion who conquers, there is a silence that follows. And for every empire that claims eternity, there is a scroll that outlives them all. In the end, Ashurbanipal's library and Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of the temple in Jerusalem became sacred echoes in humanity's collective memory. These echoes whisper through time, of power gained and lost, of divine judgment and redemption, of wisdom and folly, of chosen kings and the God who alone is eternal.